Okay, we're beginning recording. We are on Perek Aleph, Mishnah Ches, which we began last night. We start, as we always do, with Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Le'olam Haba. All of Israel has a share in the world to come. Shenemar, as it says, V'amech Kulam Tzadikim, your entire nation is righteous. Le'olam Yirshu Oretz, they shall forever inherit the land. Neitzer Mata'ai, they are the branch of my planting. Ma'aseh Yodai, they are the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. And we're in the Mishnah, right on the screen. Yehuda ben Tabai v'Shimon ben Shetach kiblu mehem. As we said yesterday, these were the third pair of the Zugos, and they received it from, they received the tradition from Yosef ben Yehuzer, Ish Tzereda, and Yosef ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim. And Yehuda ben Tabai Omer, Yehuda ben Tabai says, Al ta'as hatzmecha ka'orchei hadayanim, don't make yourself like one of the chief judges, or don't make yourself like a lawyer. And when you're talking about being a judge, and when the litigants in the case are before you, when they're standing before you, they should be like wicked people. And when they finally are allowed to depart from you, after they accept the din, as the Mishnah is going to say, when they accept upon themselves the din. And we spoke yesterday about the uniqueness of Yehuda ben Tabai, in that he made an error in judgment, and we said that the Orach Lener, the Orach Lener, and also the who else? We quoted a number of people that spoke about this particular case, the Ramban, and the Orach Lener really took Yehuda ben Tabai to task, but they came with an apology which stated that he did the right thing. He didn't do the right thing in his judgment. I will just mention in passing what they said. And they said that Yehuda ben Tabai knew this particular Eid Zomin that he put to death was a scoundrel who was Chayev Misa on many counts. But Shimon ben Shetach didn't buy it from him at all, despite the fact that the person was a scoundrel and the world was better off without him. You as a judge made an error, and he let him have it. And as we spoke yesterday, Yehuda ben Tabai, for every single day of the rest of his life, mourned over his misjudging of this person, despite the fact that he was an evil, evil man. We are talking about being a judge. There is a Gemara in Sanhedrin which talks about David HaMelech. Now, in the Torah, it says that a judge has to do, and Hashem does for the Jewish people, tzedakah u'mishpat. We have responsibility to not only do justice, but also to do mishpat. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin quotes a pasuk in Shmuel Beis, in which it says, "Vayihi David oseh mishpat u'tzedakah bechol amo," that David did mishpat, justice, u'tzedakah, and righteousness to his entire nation. And the Gemara asks, how do you reconcile justice and judgment? Justice and mishpat and tzedakah and righteousness. How do you reconcile mishpat, which is law, din, and tzedakah, which is an act of charity, kindness? Of course, it comes from the word tzaddik, which means righteous, but mishpat is harsh, while tzedakah is kindness. How do you reconcile the two? So the Gemara explains, when two Balei Din would come before David HaMelech, he would not pay any attention to who the two Balei Din were. One could be an extremely wealthy man, and the other one could be an extremely poverty-stricken fellow. David wouldn't pay any attention to the nature of their being, but he would hear their case. And if the poor man was judged to be in the wrong, he would say it straight out. Sorry to tell you, but the halacha is against you, and you owe the rich man the money. And then David HaMelech would go into his treasury, take out the money that the poor man was to give to the rich man. He would give it as a matana to the poor person, and he would say, despite the fact that you're wrong, Hashem is giving you a gift. Take the money and pay your debt. And so the Gemara says, therefore David HaMelech did mishpat, and he did tzedakah, and he helped the situation by alleviating the plight of the poor person, but not to, God forbid, misjudge the case, to set a precedent that would be no good for all time. Judges have to be fair, no matter who comes before them. They have responsibility to do what's right. The pasuk in Devarim says, "Lo saguru mipnei ish." You are not to fear any person. When a judge is faced with a case where one of the litigants is a fearsome gangster, and the other one is a tamima sticker, balabas, and he's afraid for his life, don't be afraid. Say it like it is. Say the din the way it's supposed to be said. If you don't want to judge the case before you hear anything, you can recuse yourself from the case. But if you're the chief judge, you can't do that. If you're the only judge, you can't do that. And once you hear the case, you can't recuse yourself. You've got to judge fairly and say it right out. You can't fudge it. Mr. Irving Bunim, who was the originator of the Pirkei Avos Shiurim, actually, in the Young Israel of Borough Park, many, many years ago. He was also known as the president of the, at that time, largest yeshiva in the city, the Rabbi Jacob Joseph School. He was the president, quite a Talmud Chacham. He wrote a 3-volume set of Perush on Pirkei Avos called Ethics from Sinai. By the way, it's available in English. And if you want to get a real nice set of books in English that have clear indications of Torah, and he was a Torah scholar par excellence, okay? So he gives an interesting example of this. He says that in the time of Baron Rothschild was the head of the Kehillah, and they needed a new Rav, and they hired a young fellow who was known as a brilliant scholar and a personable young man. And Baron Rothschild was the Rosh Kol. And they hired him. And a day or two after he was hired, Baron Rothschild came to the Rav with one of the town schleppers, you know, one of the town schnorrers. And he came with a court case that the schnorrer owed him money. And the schnorrer said, I don't owe him any money. And Rothschild pressed his case. And the schnorrer pressed his case. And the Rav was thinking to himself, this is unbelievable. My first din Torah that I have to judge, and I have to deal with the Rosh HaKol, one of the most powerful men in Jewish life on earth, one of the richest Jews on earth, and I have to sit in judgment, and he's clearly in the wrong. He's clearly in the wrong. It's too bad. Let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to tell it right out. And so he judged the case, and he told Baron Rothschild, I'm sorry to tell you, sir, but you're in the wrong, and the poor man is in the right. You owe him the money. He doesn't owe you a penny. You owe him the money. And Baron Rothschild smiled, and he said, Mazel Tov. He stuck out his hand to the Rav, and he said, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. We were testing you to see if you have the guts to judge me wrong and not be afraid, because I am the Rosh HaKol. That is what Yehuda ben Tabai is saying. Don't be afraid. You judge them. Look at them both as guilty. Doesn't matter who they are. You give the psak the way the psak is supposed to be given. And once it's accepted, then you are to look upon them as if they are both righteous. Because if, as we said yesterday, you're going to look upon them as they're righteous before the Din Torah, you're not going to listen with a critical ear to the judgment. You're going to say always, they're right, this one's right, that one's right, as we said yesterday. But if you look upon them that they're both guilty, you're going to find everything wrong, every loophole. And there are numerous examples that we could give for this, but suffice it to say that Yehuda ben Tabai is warning us not to look upon the people in too righteous a fashion, because that will prejudice our opinion of the true nature of the law. Now, there is a parish on this particular Mishnah that takes a different tack. Reb Yitzchak, Reb Moshe Alshiker, Zal, famous Reb Moshe Alshiker, comes along and he says, when it says al tas atzmecha ka'orchei hadayanim, don't make yourself like a judge trying to influence, or a lawyer trying to influence the case one way or the other. He says it pertains to not just the judge and not just the lawyer, but it pertains to each and every Jew. Each and every Jew is not allowed to go and become a lawyer and start arguing. Was Hashem just in what he did? It seems so unfair. Why do the righteous suffer? Why is there tzaddik veralo? Why is there rasha v'tovlo? I can't understand it. And if I can't understand it, I'm trying to make sense out of it. I have all the law degrees on earth. I'm a professor of law. I'm elected to the Supreme Court. I know how to adjudicate a case in all its angles. It appears to me that this righteous man is suffering for absolutely no reason. I can't understand God. Or, why is this wicked man prospering? It's so unjust. Why is there tzaddik v'ralo, rasha v'tovlo? And along comes Rav Moshe Alshiker and he says, Yehuda ben Tabai is telling us, Al ta'as atzmecha ka'orchei hadayanim. Don't make yourself like you think you know everything. You're the chief judge and prosecutor. You don't know. As HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Eov, Harishon Adam Telei. Were you born before Adam Harishon? Were you born before I created the world? Do you know what went into my cheshbon, says Hashem, in creating the world? You have any idea of all the things that I consider when something is carried out, and even though many times, it's unfathomable. It's unfathomable. We don't go and say Hashem is unjust. We can say, I'm so upset over this. It hurts me so that 1.5 million Jewish children were gassed to death in the Shoah. How can you make sense out of this? How do you make sense out of 6 million innocent people who never lifted a finger to hurt anybody? Were totally destroyed? You're going to make sense out of this? Can you make sense out of the Jews in the time of the Chmielnitsky revolt and the Cossacks in Russia that was slaughtered and burned? About the Spanish Inquisition when they burned people at the stake? Can you make sense out of any of the persecutions and pogroms of the Jewish people? Can you make sense out of the death of one individual? Absolutely not. There's no way to make sense. Nothing. And anyone who thinks they can make sense is playing God and making a terrible, terrible error. Because lo machshavosai machshavosechem velo darchechem derachoi, said the Navi. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. you have no knowledge, no understanding. There is no way you can ever begin to fathom the justice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Never. It doesn't mean you can't say it hurts. It doesn't mean you can't say ich verstehe nicht. Of course, ich verstehe nicht. Of course I don't understand. How could I understand? I'm finite. I'm limited. I'm here today, gone tomorrow. What are you talking about? What can I possibly know in the long history of the world and the Jewish people? Impossible. Impossible. By the same token, by the very same token, to deny that there's a purpose in death is to deny that there's a purpose in life. And the people who are of the atheistic bent, who are so filled with melancholy throughout their lives, wondering, why am I here if I have no purpose? And ultimately, all they have to look forward to is a hole in the ground and nothing more. And if that's all there is in this world, then there is no right and no wrong, because it's up to the whim and caprice of individuals. Society doesn't dictate right and wrong. We've seen what societies can do with right and wrong. And it's impossible to find an empirical right and wrong without the belief in the Borei Olam, without the belief in the divine source of right and wrong. Because otherwise, it's my right against your right, my wrong against your wrong. You say and I say, and don't tell me the majority, because we've seen in Germany what the majority could do to destroy a world. And therefore, Yehuda ben Tabai comes along and says, don't make yourself into a chief cook and bottle washer to make it that you know the law and you can argue and you can say that I know, I understand, and I disagree with God. And even people who make statements that without thinking, they say, I'm angry at God. Ooh, well, you're angry. You're angry at God. Well, that's the go fight with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Go. You're angry. And what do you do when you're angry? What do? You destroy yourself. I'm angry at him. I don't keep Shabbos. I'm angry at him. I don't put on tefillin. I'm angry at him. I don't pray. I'm angry at him. I don't do anything that he wants me to do. So you basically destroyed yourself. Your anger is killing you. It's destroying the soul that you have. It's taking away the joy of your life. You're walking around filled with anger. All you have is your anger to take to the grave with you. And then the whole thing is a wisp and you're gone. And what happened to the anger? And you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he shows you everything, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, straight out. And you say, was I foolish? Of course you were foolish. Of course you were foolish. The whole atheism is foolishness. The whole concept of I can box with God. That's why a Jew who davens Ashrei, and he said, Tzadik Hashem b'chol derochav, v'chosid b'chol ma'asav. We may not be able to stomach it and like it, but it doesn't mean that our HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not just and not fair. And the truth is when the Gedolim suffer, and they do, everybody does. There is not a human being I know on earth. I do not know one human being who doesn't suffer somewhat. Everyone has. Like a Yiddish expression, jeden eine Tracht Beckel. Everybody carries a little bag of something. There is no person who's got it all. Doesn't exist. Never did, never will. We all are faced with difficulties. Some are greater than others. Some feel that their burdens are insurmountable, but they're not. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Dayan HaEmes. And the greatest example I could give you, and I saw it in my own life, Rav Moshe, Zechron Levracha, lost a child. Almost no one knows that. And anyone who saw him smile all the time would never know it. Rav David Feinstein, Shlita, he should live and be well, lost a child, a grandchild. And you'd never know it by talking to him or listening to him or watching him or being acquainted with him. Because Tzadik Hashem b'chol derochav. and they go on and live their lives filled with righteousness. Because Yehuda ben Tabai is giving us that insight. And he's telling us, Al tas atzlecha ka'orchei hadayanim. Don't make yourself one of these lawyers who tainas achais with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's go a little further. It says in the Mishnah, Ukeshe yiyu balei din omdim lefanecha, yiyu be'einecha kirishaim. If the balei din, while they're standing in front of you, you should consider them rishaim. Ukeshe niftara milfanecha, yiyu be'einecha kizakaim kishekiblu aleim es hadin. This phrase can be taken in a separate context. And let's analyze that. Yehuda ben Tabai is talking about a judge. Two people come before the judge. The judge hears each of their arguments. He deliberates. He finds one guilty, the other innocent. What should be the next step? The parties accept the judgment and they go away. As friends, former litigants who accepted the judge's ruling, they were matzdik aleim es hadin. They accepted the Das Torah and they walk out shaking hands. Then, that's what the Mishnah says, when they take their leave of you, they have to be considered righteous, because they accepted the din. And when two people are litigants and they argue with each other, and then they accept the din, let them walk out and be zakai. They're righteous. They're meritorious. They have to be merited. They should all merit to all the things that are under the category of zechusim, because they accepted the din. But what happens when the Beis Din says the psak? The judge gives the psak. And what happens? But you gave the psak. And you know what they did? They stood there in the Beis Din. They're standing in front of the Beis Din and they're arguing. The judge made a mistake. You're wrong. And the other one says, what do you mean? He judged to my favor. How could you say he made a mistake? And they're going at it in front of the judge, in front of the Beis Din. That is when ukesheyiyu balei dinim omdim lefanecha. But when the balei din don't accept the psak, they're not niftarim lefanecha. They're omdim lefanecha. If they're omdim lefanecha and they're standing before you and they're arguing it out, saying the judge was not impartial, Ken Garnet, he knows nothing. I know a judge who knows Torah, and he said, I'm right. And the other one says, you're wrong, this judge is an honest judge, and they're fighting in front of you. These both of them are Rishayim. They're Rishayim, because they didn't accept the psak. Are you going to argue? Yeah, but one did. But one did. There's an interesting way to approach. You know, if it's a money matter between two people, the best thing to do is not end up in Beis Din at all. If two people have a money dispute, settle it fairly amongst yourselves. Talk it through. Did you really promise to give that amount of money? And if you did, shouldn't you? And if the other one says, I never, ever promised, are you 100% sure? Look, I think I'm right. You think you're right. Can we reach a compromise and settle it so that we both can feel good about not trying to get our money through the court system? Isn't it a little bit of a shanda for us from a Yidden, us religious Jews, to go at each other's throats? Now, I'm not saying that you can always do this. Sometimes you reach an impasse and it's impossible to figure out who's right and who's wrong because it's so complicated. And you really do need a dayan. But if you're an honest Jew and you come with your other fellow who's honest, and it's a matter of deciding where the psak is, as both are honest, then you need a dayan, and you're going to walk out and you're going to be zaka'im. It's only when you're so disagreeable to each other that there's such an animosity towards each other, and you can't possibly settle it. That's where coming to Bezdin is painful, even though sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes you have no choice. But when you have to go to Bezdin, it is painful. It would be much better if you could reach a pshara and settle it amicably. There are times in everyone's life when you feel you're 100% correct. But sometimes you have to take a step back and say, you know, maybe I wasn't so exacting in my words when we made the deal. And maybe he heard differently than me. Maybe I could have been more specific, and maybe he could have been more specific. And if it's at all possible to make a pshara, that's exactly what you should do. And Yehuda ben Tabai is fleshing that out for us and letting us know that if it's possible for you to decide to agree with each other, you'll never come to the point of what Yehuda ben Tabai was talking about. Now, before we end with Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, I want to go back to the original thing we learned about Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, which I mentioned at the beginning of the Shiur yesterday and today again. That Yehuda ben Tabai, in the Gemara in Makkos on Daf Hey days, put someone to death. He believed, said the Ramban, as we spoke about the Aruch LaNer, that he deserved it. He was a scoundrel. But nevertheless, the Gemara records that every night Yehuda ben Tabai would go to his grave and cry bitter over the fact that he made a mistake. And there was a question in the Gemara: whose cries were they hearing? Were they hearing the cries of Yehuda ben Tabai, who was begging forgiveness? Or were they hearing the cries of the person that he misjudged and he was screaming over his lack of a future on this earth because of Yehuda ben Tabai's iniquity in misjudging him? And the Gemara doesn't reach a conclusion, but it does offer the following. One Manda Omar says, it must have been the cries of the one who died, because as soon as Yehuda ben Tabai came to the Olam HaEmes and he was able to speak to him soul to soul, the cries stopped. Another one says no. The cries were from Yehuda ben Tabai himself. And the proof is that the day he died, the cries stopped. And that's because he stopped crying. Says Yehuda ben Tabai, Ukeshenef Tarim milfanecha, when the people are nifter, when they are no longer in this world, whether it's the one you wronged or the one who was wronged, and it's a famous case, and everyone took sides, Yehu be'einecha kizakoim, they should be considered righteous. Kishekiblu aleihem es hadin, because in the Olam HaEmes, they accepted the din upon themselves. Rabosai, even the biggest Russia, even the most wicked person on earth, when they come to the Olam HaEmes, they accept upon themselves the din. And even if that din is eternal damnation, even if that din is eternal Gehenna, they accept upon themselves that din because they know that they were wrong. And we know that the righteous were correct. And that's why a Jew has to say, and here's a famous question. This is a question that is asked of every prospective convert to Judaism. Is good rewarded? Is bad punished? And if they don't give the right answer to that, you can't convert. Is good rewarded? Yes. Is evil punished? Yes. Follow through. We do not necessarily see that in this world. But ultimately, all good is rewarded. Every good deed you do is rewarded. Every evil someone does is punished. No one gets off. No one gets off. And this topic of the good being rewarded and evil being punished is a separate topic in and of itself, which needs a lot of time, and it's not for tonight. We'll get to it some point along the way, and we will discuss it further. But today, we finished the Mishnah of Yehuda ben Tabai and Mirz Hashem. On Wednesday night, we'll continue with this Mishnah, going to the Mishnah which talks about Shimon ben Shetach. Okay.